Ever wonder what cavemen actually did all day? Turns out, their lives were anything but lazy. Here's how they stayed busy from dawn to dusk. When we think about cavemen, the usual image pops up: messy hair, rough clothes, maybe holding a wooden club and sitting around a fire. But what were they really doing all day? Were they just passing the time, or was there more going on? Turns out, life back then was a lot more active and thoughtful than we give it credit for. Cavemen weren't just surviving. They were figuring things out, creating tools, working together, and laying down the basics of the life we live now. Finding food. If there was one thing that took up most of their time, it was finding food. Survival completely depended on it. And unlike us, they didn't have the luxury of walking into a store. They had to go out and get their meals themselves every single day. Hunting wasn't easy. Chasing animals through forests and rocky landscapes took serious effort. They used stone-tipped spears, and later on, tools like spear throwers and bows. And they didn't just hunt alone. They worked in groups, planning how to corner or trap their prey. It wasn't just about catching food, it was also about learning how to work as a team. But hunting didn't always go as planned. When the animals were hard to find or things didn't go well, they switched to gathering. Berries, nuts, roots, and leaves became their backup. This came with its own challenges. They had to know what was safe to eat, because one mistake could be deadly. That kind of knowledge wasn't random. It was passed down, taught carefully, and remembered like a mental guidebook to the wild. So gathering food wasn't just about picking whatever they saw. It was a mix of survival skills, sharp instincts, and years of experience shared across generations. Tools. And to gather or hunt properly, they had to have the right tools. They didn't have machines or metal, so they worked with whatever was around, like stone, wood, bone, even antlers. These simple materials were shaped into things like knives, scrapers, spears, and fishing hooks. It wasn't about randomly smashing rocks together. Making tools took real skill. Flint knapping, for example, meant carefully shaping stone into sharp edges. One wrong move and you could ruin something you'd spent hours working on, but if you got it right, that tool could be the reason your group ate that night. They also made things with more than one purpose. Bone needles were used to stitch animal hides into clothes. They set up traps to catch smaller animals or fish. Over time, their collection of tools kept improving. It showed how their thinking was growing too. Every new tool wasn't just useful, it was a small step forward in how humans learned to solve problems. Building shelter. Of course, even the best hunters and toolmakers needed somewhere safe to rest. Caves were great when they could find them, but that wasn't always the case. A lot of the time, they had to build their own shelters using whatever materials they had: branches, leaves, stones, and animal skins. They had to hold up against wind, rain, and cold nights, and they needed to be secure enough to keep wild animals away. Some were simple and temporary, built for groups that moved around. Others were more solid and meant to last longer for families that stayed in one place. These homes weren't only about protection, they brought people together. This is where they shared meals, took care of each other, and sat around the fire telling stories. These shelters became more than just a place to sleep. They were the beginning of something familiar: home, tribes, and togetherness. Cavemen didn't go it alone. They lived in small bands or tribes, and this social structure was essential to their survival. In these communities, roles were shared. Some hunted, others gathered, while elders passed down knowledge and children learned by watching and playing. This early sense of cooperation allowed the group to function like a single organism. If someone were injured or sick, others would care for them. Food was shared, and decisions were made collectively. And what's even more surprising, they found ways to communicate. They didn't have a spoken language like we do now, but they used gestures, sounds, and expressions to get their point across. It helped them plan hunts, stay safe, and teach each other. Over time, that kind of communication probably turned into the first steps toward real language, creativity, and expression. Even with all the effort it took just to survive, they still found room for creativity. They weren't only focused on food and shelter, they also had the urge to express what they felt. Cave paintings are one of the clearest signs of that. These weren't random drawings. Many showed animals, hunting scenes, or symbols, and they may have been used to tell stories, pass down knowledge, or take part in rituals. They made beads from shells, carved little figures, and even decorated their bodies. It shows they had emotions, beliefs, and a sense of beauty, things that went far beyond survival, play, learning, and growth. And while the adults were busy with survival, the kids were learning in their own way. Play wasn't just for fun. Running, hiding, chasing, and throwing were games. But they also helped kids build the skills they'd need later. Through play, they learned how to stay sharp, work with others, and move like a hunter. And they learned not in classrooms, but by watching, copying, and trying things out. Whether they were gathering food or helping around the camp, kids picked things up by being involved. Every moment was a chance to learn something that could one day save their life. Fire. And then came fire, one of the most important discoveries in human history. Fire changed everything. It provided warmth on cold nights, light after sunset, and protection from predators. But most importantly, it allowed cavemen to cook food, making it easier to chew and digest, and killing harmful bacteria. But fire wasn't easy to manage. Starting and maintaining a flame was a daily chore, requiring skill and constant attention. Knowing how to spark fire using friction or striking stones was a life-saving skill every tribe needed. Fire was their technology, a tool that gave them control over their environment in ways nothing else could. On the move. Cavemen were also nomads, often moving from place to place. Sometimes it was seasonal, animals migrated, or the weather shifted. Other times it was due to danger, scarcity of food, or simple curiosity. But every move meant learning a new landscape, new plants to study, animals to track, and dangers to avoid. This constant movement honed their adaptability and allowed early humans to spread far beyond their original homelands. A life far from lazy. So what did cavemen actually do all day? They hunted wild game with clever strategies, gathered edible plants with inherited knowledge, and crafted tools with precision. They built shelters, created art, shared wisdom, raised children, and kept the fire burning. They communicated, played, learned, explored, and cooperated. They worked together to solve problems, stay alive, and even make space for creativity and culture. Far from being lazy or dull, cavemen were innovators, survivors, artists, and community builders. Every hour of their day was filled with purpose, effort, and growth. Their lifestyle was tough, but incredibly rich, the blueprint of human development. And through it all, both men and women contributed equally, each playing vital roles to ensure their group's survival. Their story reminds us that human greatness didn't start with smartphones or skyscrapers. It began in the firelit shelters of those who came before us,